Hello, my most pious of followers, and welcome back to the Celestial Perch. Today I have a new video going over the third Shroud Covenant, the Composer of Strands. We'll be looking at the Composer in some detail, but before I do, I'd like to mention that I've officially set up the Discord, and I put a link in the description, as well as there'll be a link just on the general YouTube page as well. I've also been working on a Clone Army build and a Remnants build. These will be a bit more focused on multiplayer in general. I've sort of gotten back into some of the tournament scene and have been kind of working on just overall more powerful and fine-tuned builds. But without wasting any more time, let's jump into the video. Looking at the Composer overall, we can see the Composer has a focus on pop growth speed and leader lifespan. Even our telepath job will also give us some extra pop growth speed. More specifically, looking at just the starting bonus, we get this once we choose the Composer and actually confirm our Covenant. This will give us 10% pop growth speed, 10 leader lifespan, plus 2% pop growth speed per telepath, and has a downside of -1 species trait points. On the surface, in terms of opportunity cost, this is one of the better Covenants. We'll go over the hidden downside later when we go over the, I believe it's the 50 favor bonus. But at least just at the start, there's no super expensive ship upkeep, no reduced stability or unity, just the -1 trait picks. And that's something that we can't even really use for a while. So having that isn't too much of a downside, especially since Psionic tends to not adjust their pops too much. But before we dive into the hidden bonus, I'd like to take a look at the pop growth in general. And within pop growth, there are three main factors that we want to look at, and that would be our base growth, our modifiers, and our immigration/emigration. Now, looking at base growth, this is the most important of the three, and it will determine how useful our percent modifiers are. Base growth is determined by this equation up here on the screen, and the three most important factors that play into our base growth are the planetary population capacity, the population, and our logistic growth ceiling. Looking at each of these a bit further, population overall will affect both the equation and the growth required for a new pop. Planetary capacity will also affect the total base growth, more capacity being better in general, and logistic growth ceiling will determine our max base output. So, looking at a few different equations, we can see how each of these will impact our base growth. The important thing to note is that our base growth is what we will apply all percent pop growth modifiers to. So if we have a low base growth, either due to low capacity or too high of a population on the planet, our percent modifiers won't be doing very much. Now, pop growth is kind of a weird mechanic in Stellaris, so I won't dive too much into the actual math. I'm just going to kind of show you guys the equations that I've shown before. Just keep in mind, base growth per the equation varies between 0.3 and logistic growth ceiling times 3 for a default of 4.5. Depending on how much you change that setting, it will adjust the max base growth that we can achieve. So the higher we are able to get our base growth, the more useful our percent modifiers will be. And in general, the easiest way to do this is to increase our planetary capacity. In general, planetary capacity is just our housing plus our unblocked districts. Each unit of unused housing will increase our planetary cap by 1, and unblocked unused districts will increase our planetary cap on tomb worlds and habitats by +3, on relic, machine, ring, and all regular worlds by +4, and on Gaia, Eco-Monopolis, and Hive worlds by 6. Just try to keep all of that in mind. I know it's a lot, but it is sort of important to understand when choosing the Composer of Strands. Now, looking at our 20 favor bonus, we get additional pop growth speed from our telepaths, so 5% instead of 2%. This is a replacement effect rather than being additive, so it won't be 7% total, it just increases from 2 to 5. As well as we get access to the Sanctum of the Composer. The building here is actually one of my favorite of the 4. It will give us +10 habitability at the start or relatively early game when it's the most useful. This can, reduce pop upkeep and amenities usage while increasing our job output and pop growth. In addition to the 5% resources from jobs empire-wide, it will really help our economy throughout the entire game. Overall, the 20 favor bonus here is quite solid, and you can get to this pretty quickly as it's one of the earlier bonuses, and being able to build this on your capital, netting you a total of 5 telepath jobs for a total of an additional 25% pop growth speed, is quite nice in the early game. Now, moving on to our 50 favor bonus. It's a simple doubling of our starting bonus, so we go from 10% pop growth speed to 20%, plus 10 leader lifespan to plus 20, and -1 organic species trait pick to -2. Here I will also mention the hidden downside. This will occur roughly every 15 years since confirmation, and for the Composer of Strands, we have a 85% chance of losing a random trait on one of our psychic species and gaining another random trait. Part of this is we could either gain a pre-sapient trait or just another random trait. So if you care about a specific trait on your species, or you're building your species to have specific traits, something like aquatic, you have to be careful because you can lose that, and it can be extremely detrimental to your build. So it's best to have multiple species that are psionic in your empire. It's not really effective to be focusing on just one specific species, like being xenophobe and only having one psychic species, as then that species will be changed consistently, and you might lose a lot of your important traits like intelligent, charismatic, rapid breeders, aquatic, and it can cripple your build. So it's best to have multiple species, maybe playing something where you're able to either take advantage of migration treaties, stealing pops and assimilating them, or just don't care too much about your species traits overall and focus more just on having more pops. Now, on the flip side, you could also have a species that loses one of your negative traits and gains a beneficial trait. So you can either end up with some really crazy powerful pops or some really truly awful pops. It really just enhances the Shroud gambling to the maximum, which in my opinion kind of pushes the Composer of Strands to be a lot more fun and a lot more enjoyable as a Shroud Covenant, as sometimes you'll end up with just some crazy species setup. The last thing to consider is that you do have a 15% chance for one of your leaders to randomly die. This can be pretty annoying if you're getting a specific scientist to rush down techs, you have a really good admiral, or you've picked up a nice governor. Having them die, especially if you're curating good leaders, can be quite unfortunate. Now moving on to the 90 favor bonus. All leaders here, save the general, are pretty good. It's lacking a powerful admiral, which is quite unfortunate, as it can be a pretty big power spike in the early game if you're able to get psionic early through something like Teachers of the Shroud, and then rush through your specific covenant using either civics or traits or other just features that you can focus on. It might not take you too long to get to 90 favor, and you will be able to take advantage of one of these leaders, so losing access to the Admiral can be kind of unfortunate. Still, if you have to choose between one of these, I would either go between the Governor or the Scientists here. The Ruler overall is sort of redundant. You don't need that much leader lifespan, and leader experience gain is just not as effective as you would hope. So choose between either the Governor or the Scientist, just depending on your situation. And moving on to the final bonus, the 150 favor bonus, we basically get the Nanite Repair utility slot, which is 15% daily hull regeneration and plus 20% daily armor regeneration. And keep in mind that this is multiplied by 5 out of combat, so much more effective out of combat, but still can have some fringe uses inside of combat. Comparing it to the regular hull regeneration technology, which is 5% and 10% respectively, this is quite a significant boost. Just tactically speaking, it's kind of useless. You know, comparing something like regeneration to chance to hit, extra speed, shield hardening, you know, there are quite a few other options that will help you out a lot more in actual combat. It's just strategically, this can be very powerful, allowing you to push deeper into enemy lines and not have to use star bases, being able to chase down enemy fleets, take battles, hopefully win them, and then be able to continue chasing down the enemy fleets without having to send yours back to repair, can be invaluable. It just depends on the situation. In something like multiplayer, where maybe in the early stages of the game, or even in the later stages of the game, where you're looking to just win a specific battle and then push on, take a planet, and kind of cripple the opponent with one fell swoop, might not be as useful to have this specific utility slot. whereas it has a lot more power, or at least a lot more potential, in single player, where you can push deeper into the AI territory and not really have to worry about your fleets having to be sent back to repair. It still has its uses in both single and multiplayer. It's just I don't think it will beat out some of the other options. So now that we've looked at all of the bonuses for the Composer of Strands, I'll just go over kind of a brief overall impressions, what I think about it, just how I feel. And remember, for the last one, I will eventually rate them all 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I'm going to wait until the end to do that. But overall, for the Composer of Strands, I feel it's one of the more powerful ones, or at least has potential, depending on your playstyle. If you're able to get it earlier, the better, as that's when you'll more than likely have higher base growth and be able to take advantage of these percentage modifiers. Whereas if you get this super late into the game, where you're already reaching, 200, 300 population total, it's not going to be as useful. It's just going to be kind of some minor benefits here and there. And the leader lifespan, as you get to be a better player, most of the time you'll be able to deal with leader lifespan through technologies and traditions, and even getting 10 to 20 extra leader lifespan will be more than enough to keep your leaders alive for basically forever. By the time you reach repeatables, they should never die. The downsides here, or the Composer of Strands, as I mentioned before, can be kind of annoying depending on the build you're going. If you're playing something like Aquatic, if you're playing a specific curated build where you need your pops to have specific traits, do not take Composer of Strands, because even if you're able to get several psionic species, it's still down to chance, and you wouldn't want your run to be ruined by the Composer taking away Aquatic and giving you Repugnant. That would be crippling. So overall, I think it has potential, and as long as you're willing to work around the downsides, it's honestly not that bad. The immediate downsides are basically unnoticeable. The reduced species trait picks, because you're not going to have gene modding for probably a bit, do nothing. And comparing that to something like 100% ship upkeep or reduced stability in Unity, the Composer of Strands is a relatively easy pick. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you're interested in more, please like and subscribe, and also check out the Discord. But thank you and have a blessed day.